am I right in saying that you have a young horse who is a little bit of a potential superstar called Cooley HHS Calmaria, and that Equilume has made a real difference in terms of finding the key to unlock some of her talents?
Yeah, she's an interesting mare. I always say she's probably one of the trickiest horses I've ever had and the most talented. She's quite quirky and she's quite hot, and she's got a lot of opinions. And it was interesting when I first met Michael at Equilume, we just put one of the masks on her, and we put the mask on her and she immediately put her head to the floor, which was the weirdest thing. So we started using that regularly on her and at the shows and everything, and she's definitely turned the corner, almost instantly settled more as a horse and become more trainable.
Welcome everyone to the Equiratings Eventing podcast, and this is a very interesting one. And if, like me, you're interested in all different ways of life and how we work, this is the big thing that I find always interesting when we're talking to Barbara, who we've talked to before, but with the Equilume product, we're always talking about light, and we're talking about the effect that light has on us. And look, we're recording this deep in the middle of winter. You might be listening to it at any time of year, but it has such an effect on us. And I find this conversation fascinating, just even thinking of myself as a human being and the effect on my mood and my performance as a human being. So hopefully this entire show and concept is going to be of interest to you. Specifically, what we're going to be diving into it's going to be more of the breeding side of things. That breeding season is around the corner, as we say optimistically, in the depths of winter right now, waiting for spring and encouraging spring to come on. But Dr. Barbara Murphy, welcome back to the show, and you are going to be the person to shed light on all of this for us.
Thank you very much, Sam. Delighted to be back with you again.
So I am being very kind of selfish here, because I have two wonderful mares. One has just finished racing. She's a 6-year-old, and she's now literally just run her last race. So she's actually coming up from the UK, and we're going to be thinking about covering her because she's a thoroughbred early, as early as possible in the season. So we'll talk about that type of a situation, and then we've also got the same with the sport horse, where maybe the timing, the earliness isn't quite so important because it's going to be sort of later on in their career when we'll be thinking about selling that horse. But let's start with this concept, a mare who's not been in full and is kind of fresh and a kind of a blank canvas in many ways. And how are we going to go about getting her ready for the breeding season?
Okay, well, it's nice to have a specific case to have a look at. So, I mean, in general, most of your listeners understand that as the days get longer, this is what switches on the reproduction hormones for mares, and how they actually respond to the environment is through the length of day. So as the days get longer, the nights get shorter. And during the nighttime, there's an important hormone called melatonin produced. And when there is a really long duration of melatonin, as there is right now in these long dark nights, this switches off the reproductive axis for the mare and stops the release of reproductive hormones from the brain that act on the ovaries. But as the days would naturally start to get longer, March into April is when most mares would transition in. And of course, for the thoroughbred industry, we have economic pressure on breeders to produce early foals, because these are the foals that once they turn 1 year of age become the mature yearlings, the precocious 2-year-olds that we hope will be mature, ready to run, and will make us the big bucks. So for a maiden mare, which is in your case, there are some important things to think about. For maiden mares, it's quite a stressful transition to go from their competitive career at a racetrack or a racing yard to life as a horse, because that's what you're giving them now. Is you're letting them come back, have pasture time, but also when we talk about maiden mares, particularly that have been in training and that have been stabled every day, It's important that we don't stress their system too much by putting them straight out in the cold in this weather. So blanketing would be important, and maintaining their nutrition at a good high level so that they're not going into the season underweight, that they have an optimum weight. And when it comes to lighting, if you want to, which I'm sure you do, breed from her early, right at this time, we ideally start around the 1st of December. So every week that you start light therapy after the 1st of December, the rule of thumb is a week later for the first ovulation. And it takes 70 days on average. So 10 weeks from the start of putting mares under a long day length. So we're going to stimulate the spring photoperiod that they would normally get in March and April by putting them under light for 16 hours a day approximately. And you could do this, mares that are used to your typical breeding stock, that have a foal most years, that are pregnant, or that are used to living outdoors. You could use a light mask with these mares and leave them out where they'd be naturally more fertile, because they're moving, and this helps with their uterine tone. They're with their bodies, so this helps with their stress levels. And unless the conditions get very, very bad, and horses are pretty good at dealing with cold because they have their own little internal furnace, their hind gut. So as long as they're getting plenty of good forage, they can keep themselves warm, no problem whatsoever. They don't like the driving rain as much. That's where we need to protect them. So
No,
with a maiden mare,
none of us.
yeah, I know. So with your maiden mare, you as soon as you get her back, or before you get her back, she should be under lights. She should be getting a long day length. And the sooner you start, the more cycles you have to work with earlier in the season. So because
Is there a set number of cycles, Barbara? Is that a true thing?
Mares are very variable. Okay, so generally when mares start cycling naturally in April, they will continue cycling until the start or mid-December. So a lot of people think that they stop cycling, in June, but the natural breeding season would run from April, May, June, July, August. And when we did our first studies with the light mask, it was kind of the first time the vets I was working with, in order to get a cohort of mares that we wanted to work with, we wanted to see if they were all in winter shutdown so that we could use the light to bring them forward. So we palpated a lot of mares to look at their ovarian activity in late November. And there was about 65% of them still cycling. So
Wow.
when they actually do shut down is around mid-December, a lot of mares. And of course, there's lots of factors that control this: the age of the mare, her nutrition, how much energy she has. But a lot of mares will keep going until November, early December. But when they are not cycling is generally January, February, March, when we want them to be. So really, 6 months of the year they're cycling well. There's 2 months coming in, 2 months coming out when they're transitional, and then they're out of season for 3 to 4 months when they're not cycling. That is what the normal mare does, but most people don't own normal mares, but that's the rule of thumb. So with your thoroughbred mare, you can use the stable lights to allow her transition into kind of life in a breeding role, and so that she's not turned out into this nasty, cold, frosty weather straight away. And it would be really important that if she is obviously blanketed at the racing yard, that she will be continued to be kept warm when she moves to your place. So starting her under lights as soon as you can. The nice thing about the stable light is to help with stress in horses, or a big transition in an animal's life following transport. The Equilume stable light has that lovely red light function at night, which seems to have a calming effect on horses and allows their natural melatonin to rise at night, but allows them to rest. And we're hoping we'll see in some studies that we're doing that it improves the sleep behavior and their subsequent kind of mood and well-being when they have that nice red light at nighttime. So the stable light provides the blue enriched light by day for the 16 to 17 hours. It instead of having an abrupt light on, light off at dawn and dusk, which can be stressful for horses, anyone who's walked into a barn and turned a white light on in the middle of the night will know that they get a kind of a jumpy response from the inhabitants of the stables, as we all would if someone turns the light on over us at nighttime. But the dawn transition, the gentle changing of the light in the Equilume stable light from red up to a bright white in the morning seems to be kind of helping in keeping them less stressed as well.
Yeah, it's cool walking into the barn and having being able to operate on those, very early starts and things like that you don't have to shock everybody else and wake everybody else up, that you still have it. But it's also pretty peaceful. This time of year, all of our horses are on the short day. So when we're going to check them at nighttime as well and look at them, it's pretty peaceful. It's a lovely aura to be walking into a barn with the red lights on. And it's just very handy that you can do all those little checks and things like that and just see that everyone's fine without having to turn on a bright light at 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night.
Very good. And for your sport horse mare, when do you hope to breed her?
Well, probably it kind of comes down to logistics more than anything. I think there's two things that I'm trying to balance off and consider. One, if we were to use frozen semen, if we're going for a kind of a higher value stallion that's harder to get, maybe one from Europe, and it's expensive and it's potentially more tricky as well. You're thinking of starting early enough so that if the first one didn't work, you're not getting too late for your second go. It's a little bit of kind of a defense strategy there, but obviously, hopefully, you're looking for success, and we'll talk about maximizing that chance of success. Early March, you're talking about a foal then being born in February, which is probably logistically than anything else. We try and we obviously love when the thoroughbred foals are born at that time of year. But it's colder. The fields aren't as in good condition. You're having to support a little bit. There's just a little bit more work. Whereas when the foals are born in May, you're getting them turned out so quickly, and they're starting to spend much more time outside for a longer period. So it's just a lot easier. So I would say we'll maybe think at the end of March of looking first go with our sport horse mare.
And if she was happy enough to live outside when the weather is nice enough, then obviously the lighting could be provided to her using one of our breeding light masks. And what it really does is it gives you more chances to have a successful outcome the earlier they start cycling. I have always found from talking to a lot of breeders that it's the second ovulation of the season, which can be more successful. So when you imagine that a mare starts cycling for the first time, her hormones aren't hitting their peak levels. So the cycling starts, the transitional period is a bit erratic, and sometimes after they ovulate, the empty follicle produces a hormone called progesterone, and that's really important for maintaining pregnancy in the early weeks. For keeping the uterus a really nice environment for the embryo to implant. But what we find is if you breed mares on their very first ovulation of the season, there isn't enough progesterone being produced by that first corpus luteum, that empty follicle. So oftentimes the next or the second ovulation can be more fertile. And that's why it's nice if the sooner you start, the faster she's stably cycling and you have more cycles to work from. And especially when you're using frozen semen, which is very expensive, and you have to time the insemination so carefully, with the timing of ovulation, you want the best chances of success. So oftentimes, if she has been cycling once or twice before that, had a couple of ovulations, then she's more likely to be successful in maintaining the pregnancy once she conceives.
That is very interesting, and I think kind of reassuring. We're set up with obviously all of the lights, both in where the mares are in pens and with the masks for the mares that are out. Making sure that the system is up and active and getting going nice and early, like not it doesn't have to be ridiculously early, but I guess Barbara, you could have a mare who could be quite slow, and maybe that first gestation period only coming in April, say, if they were a little bit slow. So then you might only be kind of up and running by May, and then it is starting to get quite late. Certainly, if again, if you're having to have a couple of attempts and things like that. So, good information to know that to get them going. Now, a very interesting subject here that I didn't think about at all. And it's about when even in utero, when we have this little embryo or whatever we are, my biology isn't the best, Barbara, but when there is a foal growing inside his mummy's tummy, that we can already be preparing that horse for an athletic career as a high performing athlete. Talk to me about that side of things.
Yeah, I mean, people don't realize that, the environment that the foal develops in influences its development. And it makes sense when you put it like that. So if you think about it, nature intended foals to be born during the longest days of the year, when there's plenty of bright light, long days, and that light turns on not just reproductive hormones for the mare, but it turns on growth hormones. Most people know that as the days get longer, horses start to put on more muscle, respond better in training, can have this summer vigor effect. Well, that all comes from the fact that the busiest time in a horse's life, if they were living in the wild, is during springtime, when reproductive activity, when mares are foaling and being rebred, stallions are fighting off other stallions, chasing down their mares, everybody's moving, it's all go, go, go. So everything needs to be growing as fast as it can, muscles need to be maturing, horses need to be putting on muscle weight. So that's kind of why the time of year not only influences when the mare starts to cycle, but it also plays a role in the development of the foal. And normally, if mares were bred in April or May and June, they would be foaling April, May, when the mare would have been receiving the natural long day light that causes an increase in growth hormones in her circulation. And we know that these hormones, either directly or indirectly, are communicated to the foal to encourage the maturation of the foal in utero. And to try and get people to explain this, if you look at pregnancy lengths across the breeding season, the longest pregnancy lengths occur earlier in the year when the mares are foaling during the darkest days. The shortest pregnancy lengths occur May, June, July, when light is there to stimulate the foal's development in utero. So they grow at the right pace, they run out of room on time, and when a foal runs out of room and gets a little bit stressed in a tight space in its mummy's tummy, that's when parturition or the foaling cascade starts and the foal is born. And the other really interesting fact is that the foals that are born early in the year, on average, have a lower foal birth weight than the foals that are born closer to when nature intended, May, June, July. So we found about a 4 kilo or 10 pound difference between foals born in January and foals born in June. And this seems to be consistent. And we now know that it's light that regulates this, and it's light to the mare in her final trimester of her gestation. So around 100 days before the mare's due date, if you return the long day light therapy to the pregnant mare, it influences the foal's development. And we have shown this recently in a really nice 2-year study that was done at Brandenburg State Stud in Germany with Christine Aurich's research group at the University in Vienna. They showed that foals born to mares wearing light masks that receive the light in the last 100 days, they get to their feet 15 minutes faster. When you take a blood sample, they have a higher what's known as neutrophil lymphocyte ratio. So they look at the proportion of white blood cells there that dictate how strong their immune system is. They have a stronger immune system because they have been under the influence of hormones circulating in the mare that influence maturity. When I did the very first study that looked at pregnancy length and also foal birth weight, we found about an 8.5 pound or 4 kilo weight difference in foals that were born from mares wearing light masks. So when you put it all together, you are, that is the environment. And the really interesting thing about growth in the horse's life, the fastest period of daily growth in the horse's life occurs in the 3 months before it is born. That's
before
when
it's born. Interesting.
before it is born. After that, every single day, the average daily gain decreases. So that last 3 months, there's this rapid rise and what's being put down? The skeletal framework for the future athlete, the cartilage framework that makes up the bone structure and the bone mineralization, which is only partially complete when the foal is born. But that period of time is crucially important for the development of what should hopefully be the future athlete. And a lot of people, if you look back at all the racing records and you look at Kentucky Derby winners and you look at that, people say, oh, all of the best racehorses were often born later in the year. This was before we knew anything about how light therapy could influence the development of the foals. But a lot of people look for foals that are not born that early, that are born a little later. But nowadays, we can correct the problem we created by having this unnaturally early breeding season by just giving the mares back light. And really, when some of the feedback we get from many of the breeders that use Equilume find that when they start using it on their pregnant mares, they're seeing reductions in their pregnancy length and really nice, mature, big foals that are healthy. And the more times they use it, they're tightening up their breeding season each year because they're stopping mares that are going past their due dates and that are slowing down everything and waiting for light to be right for them to do what nature intended.
I think the thoroughbred breeders in particular must be really pricking their ears at this because there's such there's such a commercial element to it, but and there's a reason for that, with the national hunt horses in particular, that bigger frame and that stronger athlete, they do perform well, and there is a high demand for them, and it's very important come the sale time. The difference between being 16 hands versus 16 1 or 2 in that sales ring is a very it's like falling off a cliff in terms of price and things like that. So it is, and it's amazing thinking. A lot of people will be thinking, oh, when they're a 2 turning 3-year-old, if we're producing this horse for the store horse sales, let's really get the feed into this horse now and see, can we help it to grow? But it sounds like we're about 3 years too late at that point.
Well, I mean, there's a lot that can be done after the foal is born, but you kind of want to give it the best start in life and to have the strongest immune system during those first critical few months. And with regard to height, what we've noticed mostly, because I didn't record height in my studies, but we see in the German study, there was a slight reduction in the height of about less than 1 centimeter in the foals that were born to the light masks. So I'm not going to say that they're born bigger, but they're born heavier. So because there was no difference in weight or an increase in weight, what that tells me is it's greater bone density. So you have a stronger animal. So particularly in the flat racing, it's not always the tallest horse that's most desirable. It's the one with the best bone and the best durability.
Yeah, getting that power, a strong athlete, and I think what type of athlete they are is going to be down to the genetics a little bit, whether you're breeding show jumpers or dressage horses, event horses, flat jumping, racing, whichever road you're going down. But in all of those cases, we're all talking about an athlete, and we're all talking about development, physical development as that athlete, and certainly we don't want them to be deprived in any way or kind of cut short on any of those things. So let's talk then a little bit later on. I mean, I find it fascinating that the whole A with getting the mare in full, B this these final few months of the pregnancy as well. That's really interesting. And I think the key point that I took out of that is that the old-fashioned way of of trying to start early to almost artificially have a more mature horse come sales time, simply just because you're starting earlier, the horse is going to be older, and that's all it was potentially from nature. There was a little bit of a natural deficit, because they were growing in a less natural time of year. So being able to compensate for that is surely a game changer, and very interesting. And so then what we're doing, let's say we have a foal. We're thinking about the yearling stage is when we want to go to the sales. So we've got a bit more time now. We've got another year and a half, I guess, from when this healthy foal has hit the ground. What are we going to be doing, let's say, with their first winter as a foal?
With regard to how you would manage them under lights, or?
Yeah, I think so. So what I would be thinking is again, we want this horse to keep developing, A, as naturally, but B, as without any, as I kind of say, natural constraints, which I think it feels to me in Ireland, when I see people going off to the Sunshine Tour, whether it's in America, in Florida, or over here going to Spain, and they're kind of setting off at the end of, beginning of February maybe. And I'm kind of getting quite envious of them, because I'm like, God, it feels like I've already had 4 months of winter. Do I really need another month here in February? So I know they're still going to need a winter, but is it beneficial to make that a little bit shorter if we can?
Absolutely. I mean, depending on where you are in the world, your day length and your temperature, and there's so many different climatic changes and light changes depending on the latitude that horses are kept at. But one of the things that we can do is, if horses can't be left outdoors under the optimum lighting, which is provided by nature, even though in some places there is a long winter, we have carefully developed lighting programs that maximize the circa-annual, the annual internal rhythms in horses with regard to their, when they develop and grow. And the idea with this program that we have with our stable light is it does two things. First, it improves the daily health of the animal, because wherever we are, there's going to be really dark, foggy days. If anybody's living in Kildare at the moment, it is very, very dark and foggy most of the days. And that's not ideal for the horse's body clock to operate. So the first thing that you can do with your young animals is ensure they're getting blue enriched light by day. So really good lighting in the stable, and rest at night. But the second internal rhythm that's so crucial for horses is they do have an annual rhythm. We've talked at length about the annual rhythm at reproduction. And I touched on the fact that because they have this reproduction rhythm, they also have this natural rhythm when they tend to put on more muscle, gain weight, improve their metabolism. So as the days are getting longer, horses are in like muscle production mode. They're getting ready for the active repro season. And as the days are getting shorter, and in winter, they change their metabolic activity a little bit. I mean, they still perform really well, but they will put more emphasis on maybe storing fat rather than working on muscle. So there's times of year regulated by day length when horses potentially perform better. And what we try to do is, you cannot get rid of the annual rhythm for a horse. It exists internally. If you try to keep the lights the same duration all year round, you'll still find a horse that eventually blows their coat. But what you can do is you can maximize that rhythm by giving them a shorter winter period that still maintains strong circadian rhythms, but bringing spring forward sooner. And our stable lights adjust automatically every day, but do so ahead of nature. So it brings them forward sooner. It doesn't need to be an abrupt transition like it does for our breeding stock. This can happen more gradually with our performance animals to allow appetite, metabolism, muscle development to increase slowly. And then we give them a long summer. Just like many of us would like to be living in Florida, we give the horses a long summer if they're in their stable. So from around the 3rd of April on our circa annual program, that's when they hit their maximum day length, and we hold the summer day length until the start of September. So they keep that high level of summer vigor and performance longer into the year. And you must give them a little, not really a break. It's not a downtime. Horses can perform all year round, but you need to let their body see, okay, it's winter now, time to, because otherwise they'll do it themselves when you don't want them to. If you want their coats looking really well for the majority of the year, you still need them to let them get a little bit of a winter coat at some point, and then they will shed them again sooner as you bring forward the lighting. And Sam, I know you've had your horses under this system for quite a while. What have your observations been?
To be honest, it's the amount of clipping, and particularly at the end of the season. So they hold their coats much better. So I think anyone who's I think show jumpers, look, I think actually everyone, I'm sure the racing guys experience this as well, but you get to middle end of September, beginning of October, and you're sometimes looking at a horse going, oh God, I'm going to have to clip him before this next, big international or whatever we're aiming for. Now we've competed horses at Buccalo, Le Leon since we've had the lights. Now that's getting into mid to late October. And I remember with Flamenco, we didn't have to clip him, and it was amazing. And this would be a horse who would definitely, the coat would normally be turning in at the end of September. So you notice that. I've loved the influence on the horse's mood. And again, there's a lot of products that will kind of say, make your lazy horses more energetic and make your wild horses more calm. But I couldn't have had two different horses in terms of, at the time when we put in the lights, it was Arda Highlight, who was quite sharp and alert all the time, kind of too much so really for dressage, and Imperial Sky, who was very, very laid back and every day felt a little bit like, labored and hard work. Imperial Sky pepped up, and I could see it physically. I think we just gave his system a massive shot, and I think physically and mentally he was just operating so much more efficiently, particularly again, this horse in the winters. And you're thinking to yourself, there's loads of other excuses as well. Like we work in an indoor school a lot during the winter in Ireland. It's quite small. It's 20 by 40. And you're thinking to yourself, oh God, he's probably just getting sick of being in the same small space. Now he'd been in that space all his life, but the difference between when we didn't have lights 5 years ago to now having the lights in the last few years of his career, he was absolutely on fire in that small space, really working well, really working to a high level. And I guess like a lot of things, it helped his body to perform better. I was even thinking that, the amount we were feeding him and things like that wasn't really changing, but in my head I'm thinking, I just think he's utilizing everything better. His system just used to shut down a bit.
I mean, it's incredible. I mean, people kind of laugh at me sometimes. They go, oh, come on, you can't say light does everything. But when you look at the pathway that light takes, when it enters the eye and the right quality light, stimulating receptors that we only discovered in the last 20 years in mammals that control a part of the brain that regulate every single organ in the body to allow that body clock to do things in tune with each other so that every organ is working in tune and in synchrony and in harmony. And just the internal rhythm of an animal with good lighting. It's one of the reasons why we have so many issues with human health in shift workers, in office workers with poor lighting, and how this is such an important area in human medicine. So, and I love your comment about, and I mean, people will go, well, how did one horse calm down and one horse pep up? But everybody reacts differently when they're in a good mood. People who are, kind of depressed, if they get loads of sunshine, are going to be more energetic. And people who may be a little bit, on the spectrum, OCD, ADHD, and just jumping up and down, might be more relaxed when they get good sunshine and take a 2-week holiday in the sun. So it's the same thing for horses. And the really cool thing is I was at a conference in May, the Society for Research on Biological Rhythms, which is an amazing conference they hold in the US every 2 years. And it's everybody who researches chronobiology across the species on the planet. So we have lobster people, we have, algae people, we have people working on humans, people working on frogs, and me on horses, all because this biological rhythm and the reception of light and the control of the internal workings of an organism is conserved across every animal on the planet. And one of the new findings that came out was from some human research that they're doing in the States, has showed that blue light to the eye directly stimulates the part of the brain that controls mood. So while I always thought, it'll take a couple of days and weeks to see a benefit, where we've heard feedback from people who just put the light mask on or just put horses in a stable, they immediately see a change in behavior and mood. And we think that that's the reason, because when you have those blue LED lights mixed in with all the rest of them to just ensure you're getting the wavelengths that the sun would normally provide to stimulate kind of like the happiness hormones, when you get that in the stable, the horses respond to it. And I'd like to think that's what you're seeing too, Sam.
Yeah, I think that there's a big misconception when people are experiencing, kind of temperament problems, we'll call it that. Even in terms of calling a horse a hot horse, I just think sometimes it's an irritated horse, and that can be, it can be back pain, it can be physical things, but it can also be, internal thing. It can be a lack of nutrition. People kind of think, the horse is trying to buck me off. I need to feed him even less, and this horse is getting nothing. And it's just not. They're just in a bad mood, and it's like us. When we're a little bit. In the depths of winter on a gloomy day, you could go lethargic and switch off and not want to get off the sofa, or you could just be a bit irritated and a bit short and a bit sharp. And for me, that's what's you're trying to solve. The same problem will just manifest itself in different ways and in different people and in different horses. But we definitely notice two types of personalities, both enjoying themselves and benefiting. And look, we love the aesthetics of taking off that rug and seeing that lovely shiny coat underneath. There's kind of no more satisfying feeling than that. And it's interesting actually, by what resonated with me there a little bit. And it's kind of happened a little bit more by accident than by design. But when we switched from talking about quantity of daylight more with the mares and the length of the day, to then actually just the quality of light during the day, even in the winter, even when the body is saying it's winter, that the quality of light, that really resonated with me, because again, by accident, we're having to sort of share fields at the moment. We have the foals are going out in one during the day, and then they're in pens at nighttime, and the yearlings go out at nighttime and they're in during the day. And it's just because we need the field space, but also because we want to give the horses a bit of feed and things like that. And it's always easier when they're in. But what's great is that the yearlings who are in during the day, they're in under lights. And even though that has nothing to do with their, lengthening their day, what it is doing is ensuring that the quality of the daylight is there. So that's cool. And of course, we could be doing that with masks for, say, the brood mares who are also out in the field. They're out all the time. So we use masks with them. That's what our mares who are, a little bit earlier in the season, they have their masks on. So it's cool. It's cool to hear it all making sense, and it is, and that's kind of why I said at the top of the show. I think for people, I always think about myself, in these situations and how I feel on those couple of days where I think I really notice it when you have those days where it never really gets light, and you kind of think it was like dusk all day. And then thankfully I'm about an hour south of Kildare, but today the sun's really beamed through, and those are the days that you just go. I mean, we had a horrendous October, and I can remember then and November was pretty bad as well, just raining all the time. And when it's raining, it's gloomy. And then we had a dry day, but a dry day when the sun burst through for a few hours during the middle of the day, and you just went, oh my God, there it is again. Big smile, loads of, wanting to go outside and do stuff. And it definitely does have a positive effect on us. So Barbara, what else is I'm thinking of other people now who maybe not to do with breeding, but looking forward to the 2023 season and wanting to turn things around. Or are there any other things that we could be helping to correct using light? What else is going on in the Equilume labs right now? What other research are you uncovering for us?
Well, I don't know if I should be telling you, but we do have some really interesting preliminary data from some cool projects that we're doing on certain conditions that horses suffer from. And a lot of this came to us from feedback from clients who said, I have a horse with Cushing's disease. I've used the light mask to reduce their hypertrichosis, their heavy coat growth, and it seems to have really helped. And what we're running at the moment is a very large scale study that is looking at whether we can improve the quality of life for horses that suffer from certain conditions by giving them blue light, long day blue light. And kind of the early feedback from the results seems to be that, particularly with Cushing's, these horses have lethargy and depression. They have a degeneration of the neurons that produce dopamine in the brain. So they have a kind of an increased stress response to everything. And what we found when we put the blue lights on them and are finding is that it's improving their energy levels, their muscle development, and slightly reducing the amount of heavy coat that they grow in the winter. But these are early results and they need to be statistically analyzed and peer reviewed and all of that. But I'm starting to have a really good feeling about that. Another one, which is a really heartbreaking condition that about 1 to 2% of horses experience, is head shaking syndrome. That is caused by incorrect activity or overstimulation of the trigeminal nerve on the horse's face. And anyone who has seen, who owns or has ridden or worked with a horse that's a head shaker knows how disturbing it is when there's very, very little you can do for these horses. And in particular, geldings seem to suffer from it predominantly. And there's a hypothesis, a theory out there, that it's because when you castrate a gelding, you remove a lot of their ability to produce testosterone. And testosterone has a feedback effect on the brain when springtime happens. And there's a big production of reproductive hormones, even in our male horses in the spring. But without the ability to turn off this big production of reproductive hormones, geldings seem to be overstimulated. And somehow this affects the neurophysiology of the trigeminal nerve and can result in head shaking. So we've been doing a trial to see if we can prevent these horses from seeing such a big change in the lighting as it comes into spring. So instead of what we are always trying to do with our breeding stock is change the lighting and advance it so that they come into season, we want these horses to not see a big difference in light throughout the year. And by using light masks at the right time of the year, we're evaluating whether we can prevent the symptoms from getting bad in these horses that have this seasonal onset head shaking. And the early results are showing that there is definitely hope there that we might be able to do some bigger studies that show that blue light therapy can help with these type of conditions as well, which is really good from a welfare point of view and something that I'm particularly excited about.
Yeah, for sure. That is massive. And again, it's so interesting listening to how all this kind of this insight into how the body works. And I'm definitely now have an even stronger case not to be castrated because I don't want to turn into a head straight. But it's fascinating.
One other point, just a funny comment. When I was at that big biological rhythms conference back in May, and as I said, there's all species, a lot of human research. There was a poster there from a professor in the States who was looking at cluster headaches caused by trigeminal nerve pain in humans. And he showed that there was a link between this condition and a dysregulated internal clock. So circadian rhythms that are messed up was playing a role in the human condition. And I was like, oh, I wonder, is that the same as going on in head shaking in horses? And he was looked at me a little bit funny. And I was like, yeah, well, it's the same. It's light and clocks and pain in the face. And so it was, it's really interesting to see how across different species that light and the circadian rhythm can be so powerful. And hopefully we can continue to find ways to improve conditions by using light effectively.
Oh, it is fascinating. The mind never stops boggling at it all. And folks, yeah, if you're looking to bring this into your horse's life, I really think we need Humilume as well as Equilume. Because humans, we're thinking about it as well. But Equilume.com, everything is there. It's, you can follow Equilume on social media, and you can check out the website, and you'll be directed from there where to get your hands on either masks or stable lights. We use both just because we have between the mares and between the performance horses, but both suit best in different situations. So there we go. Dr. Barbara Murphy, thank you so much for joining us again. I get very formal at the beginning and end.
Thank you, Mr. Sam Watson.
Yeah, well, look, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep all the studies and stuff. It just it's fascinating. And again, I just at this time of year, it gives us such a lift to look around we've been gradually over the last 5 years. It started off with a row of stables, and then it was both rows of stables in the stable yard. And then we have the barn, and then we have all of the pens now as well. So the whole place is under lights. And as I say, the mares out with their masks on as well. It just gives you a lift to know that the horses are getting the same quality of treatment, as you say, which is being brought in the human world with office lighting and all that kind of stuff. The correlation is there, but now the solution is absolutely here as well, thanks to Equilume. So thank you. And we will no doubt be talking to you in 2023 and getting more little gems and insights along the way.